Hi, welcome to the Book Club, a mental health podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is about mental health and mental health awareness, and I'm going to go through different books that have to deal with mental health and discuss them with you guys on this podcast. So I'm super excited. This is the first episode, and the book we're going to be talking about is called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy in 7 Weeks. And it's a book that I use and a therapy that I have done personally. So I know a little bit about it, and I just can't wait to discuss this with you guys. So let's get started. What is cognitive behavioral therapy? Cognitive behavioral therapy retrains your brain and your thoughts. So any negative thoughts that you're having and you're saying to yourself, like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, things are never going to change. It is a type of therapy that helps retrain your brain and helps those negative thoughts become positive ones. So it changes the way that you talk to yourself and say things to yourself. So instead of I can't do this, you could start saying I can do this. It is possible. Things can change. So it's just a different way of thinking, and it kind of changes your thoughts around a little bit like that. It is the most effective treatment for depressive and anxiety disorders, which is very true. I have depression and anxiety, so I deal with that a lot, and it's something that I want to get comfortable talking about, especially with this podcast. I want to make it mental health awareness. So yeah, I suffer with those, and this type of therapy has helped me a lot with the disorders, and I can tell you that it has helped. So cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT is kind of what we call it, has really helped with those. And then it replaces your thoughts and feelings with ones that work. So like I was saying, instead of you can't do it, you can do it. Or it is impossible, it is possible. So it just kind of retrains your brain. It's a really cool process. Okay, so a little bit of backstory and a little bit of history on CBT therapy. So it was created in the 1960s by Aaron Beck. It was a form of psychotherapy that took root when Beck began to notice that his patients with depression often verbalized thoughts that were lacking in validity and noted characteristics cognitive distortions in their thinking. So basically what that says is he noticed that his patients with depression were talking bad about themselves and had these negative thoughts. And his way of getting them to change their thoughts and their behaviors was to create this therapy where it helps you talk through things, it helps you change your behaviors, change your thoughts, and kind of retrains your brain to focus on the positives instead of the negatives. So that's a little history. We learned about this in psychology, and it was actually created by Adler a little bit before that, and then Beck was another psychologist that kind of studied under him, and he's the one who actually created the therapy. So, but it was kind of developed a little bit earlier, but it wasn't really talked about a little bit earlier in time. So yeah, we talked about it in psychology, and I thought it was a really cool therapy that I've already used with therapists, and I never really knew the history and like the backstory to it. So it was kind of cool to learn a little bit about how it was created and everything in psychology. So pretty cool. But, so why it's important to me. So CBT therapy is very important to me because I have suffered traumas, I have anxiety, I have depression, and I have bipolar disorder. So it has helped me with all of those things. Many of my therapists that I've been through since we moved from Florida to Indiana, they have helped me through that process and have been able to help me retrain my thoughts. So I'm a little more of a positive person, and it has just helped a lot with anxiety. It helps you process trauma. It kind of helps with PTSD and panic disorders. So it's a great therapy, and that's why it's important to me. I think it's a very effective way to treat anxiety and depression, and it has helped me build coping skills, which is something that I didn't have before, and it has helped me build that, definitely. So that's a little bit why it's important to me. So now I'm behavioral therapy in 7 weeks. And why they do it in 7 weeks is because it's a short-term therapy that helps you very fastly paced retrain your thoughts and your brain to think more positively and process the trauma. So basically, whatever trauma or whatever anxiety, depression you're having, and the main subject about that, you want to take that subject and you want to process it and put it on the back burner and not think about it again. You want to, it'll always be with you, but it's not something you're going to think about every single day. It's not something that's going to affect you every single day. And it'll just overall help you kind of get through that therapy. So a little introduction. So with this podcast, what I want to do is kind of read through the books and help you guys understand them a little better and kind of talk through them with you. So if you're like me and you have ADHD and you can't focus on the same line over and over, and you just read it over and over and over again, I kind of want to just be able to talk through a book and help those people who aren't getting it, and just kind of want to learn a little bit more about the different types of therapies. So I'm going to do a lot of different books on this podcast, mental health books, and just kind of mental health, different therapies and different things that I learned in psychology, and I just really wanted to make a podcast to talk about it. So for this book, we're going to do all 7 weeks together. But for this episode, we're going to talk about the introduction to CBT therapy and a little bit about that. And yeah, so this book is available on Amazon. It's available for $7, I believe, on Amazon. They also have it at Target and Walmart. I think it's a little more expensive there, but so they have it on Amazon. That's where I got mine at. And it's a really cool workbook. It has different pages. Let's see if this will focus. Different pages you can work through and write on. And it's a cool little workbook that you could use to do the therapy yourself if you can't afford a therapist. Which I know is really expensive. So it's another reason why I made this podcast, is to help those people out who can't afford a therapy and just want a little place to come and figure out how to help themselves. So that's kind of my reason for creating this podcast. So, let's go here. Alright. So, getting familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So, in this chapter, I'll describe CBT, including a brief summary of how it was developed, and discuss how therapists might apply it. I'll also review its effectiveness, and by the end of this chapter, you should know the big idea behind CBT and what makes it powerful. So the first thing they're going to do is give you a scenario. So the scenario we're going to go through, and then I'll kind of explain it, because it took me a minute to kind of understand it. So I'll just read the scenario and then we'll walk through it. So first, let's consider Ted's experience. Ted is walking through the woods on a cool spring morning. The cherry and magnolia trees are in full bloom, and he feels the warmth of the sun's rays as they filter through the trees. The sounds of birds singing fills the air. As Ted walks, he comes upon a wooden footbridge. It's wide and solid looking, about the length of a school bus. The bridge passes over a large creek 30 or feet below. As Ted nears the bridge, he feels a sudden tightening in his chest and stomach. He peers down at the creek and immediately gets lightheaded. It feels as though he is not getting enough air. I can't do it, he thinks. I can't cross this bridge. Sorry about that. My computer decided to freeze up. So he says, I can't do it. I can't cross this bridge. He looks across the bridge to where the trail continues on the vistas he was looking forward to. As he tries to collect himself, Ted wonders why this is happening. He didn't used to have problems with bridges until he was stuck in traffic on an enormous suspension bridge during a powerful thunderstorm. Now these attacks happen often. After he feels a bit calmer, he tries to muster courage enough to cross the bridge. A few paces into it, he is overwhelmed by fear and runs back, disappointed. He heads back to his car. So basically, Ted is scared of heights because of a traumatic event that happened to him. So that's what the scenario is saying. He's scared of bridges. He says he can't do it. He tells himself he can't do it, and he does it. So let's see what happens with Ted. So here it explains, if Ted had pursued treatment in the first half of the 20th century, chances are he would have been in psychoanalysis, a therapy pioneered by Sigmund Freud and further developed by his followers. Psychoanalysis is based on Freudian understanding of the mind, which includes tenets such as early life experiences are powerful determinants of personality. Important parts of the mind are buried far below our conscious awareness. Far below our conscious awareness. Our animal drives of lust and aggression are at war with our consciousness, leading to anxiety and internal conflict. So Freud was a psychoanalysis therapist and psychologist, and he believed that the things that drive us to do what we are wanting to do is what keeps us going every day. So our drive and our ambition is what keeps us going. And he also was a psychosexual therapist and psychologist. So he was more focused on that aspect of things, and it was called the Freudian movement is kind of where he was. So parts of CBT therapy come from that, but not all of them. It's a little different. So accordingly, Freud intended psychoanalysis as a way to understand and address unconscious internal conflict rooted in childhood. So the unconscious psychoanalysis type things are talking about your unconscious thoughts. The thoughts that are deep in your mind and like when you're dreaming or sleeping, they come to the surface. So those thoughts, the thoughts are telling you you can't do it. Those are unconscious thoughts. So what happens with Ted? So Ted, it looks like you've learned to be afraid of bridges, maybe because you had that frightening experience on a bridge and now associate bridges with danger. Every time you approach a bridge, you start to panic, which feels really uncomfortable, to say the least. So understandably, you try to escape the situation. Every time you escape, you get a sense of relief. You avoided something that feels awful, so you're rewarded for avoiding. While avoidance feels better in the short term, it doesn't help you get across the bridge, because that reward strengthens the habit of avoiding. Here's what we're going to do, if you're up for it. We'll make a list of situations that trigger your fear, and we'll rate each activity for how challenging it would be. Then we'll work through the list systematically, starting with the easier ones and working up to the harder ones. When you face your fears, they diminish. It shouldn't take long before you're feeling more comfortable on bridges, as your brain learns that bridges aren't actually that dangerous. So what they're going to do is make a list of everything that he's afraid of. And they're going to go through that list and mark it from the most challenging to the least challenging. And that's kind of what you do in CBT therapy. So you make a list of things that are the most challenging or give you the most anxiety, cause the most depression, and you make a list of those from most challenging to least challenging. So, I'm skipping over some of this, but I'm getting to the main points of everything. So, a cognitive therapist might say to Ted, "It sounds like your mind is overestimating how dangerous bridges are for you. You believe that earlier either the bridge is going to fail or you're going to get so scared that you'll do something impulsive like hurl yourself over the side. What I'd like to do is look at the evidence. We can find out if a bridge is as dangerous as it feels like they are. We'll just gather some data from research, from your experience, and from experiments we can do together. For example, we could go on a bridge that you find difficult but manageable and see if you're afraid of what actually happens. Chances are you'll learn fairly quickly that bridges are sound and there's no realistic chance of you acting on impulse and doing something awful. As your mind adjusts the estimate of the actual danger, you'll feel more comfortable on bridges and get back to how your life used to be." So, in this one, it has a diagram and it says feelings, thoughts, behaviors. So feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are all connected. So your feelings is what causes your behaviors, what causes your thoughts, what causes your feelings, what causes your behaviors, what causes your thoughts. So it goes in a big circle. So basically, your feelings, your thoughts, and behaviors are all connected. And that's what CBT therapy focuses on, is your feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Because by changing those, you can become a more positive person and you can process trauma. You can deal with anxiety. You can deal with depression by changing those things. So, the principles of CBT. CBT is time limited. When treatment is open-ended, we tell ourselves, "I can always work on this next week." However, CBT is designed to provide the maximum benefit in the shortest possible time, generally around 10 to 15 sessions, which minimizes human suffering as well as cost. A shorter course of treatment can also motivate us to focus on our efforts on getting the most out of it. So that's why CBT is limited, and this book does it in 7 weeks, but when you're in sessions with a therapist, like mine was 12 weeks. So 12 weeks is a time limit. So I know I only have 12 weeks to process this trauma. I only have 12 weeks to get better. I only have 12 weeks to work on this. I only have 12 weeks, so I have to show up for every session. So it kind of limits you to figuring out how you're going to go about therapy. It gives you that guideline. It gives you a guideline of what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and for how long. So at the end of that is a closed book. The book is closed, the therapy is over, and you have done what you had to do to get over your trauma and get over your anxiety or depression, for that much. CBT is evidence-based. CBT therapists rely on techniques that have been well tested in research studies. Based on these studies, therapists can estimate how long treatment will take for a given condition and how likely a person is to benefit. CBT therapists also gather data during treatment to see what is and isn't working so they can adjust accordingly. So it's all evidence-based. So the therapists and the people who wrote this book are trained, and they have done the research, and they have figured out for each disorder, like PTSD, anxiety, depression, trauma, they have figured out what it's going to take and what they need to do, what they need to say for you to be able to get through that trauma or anxiety or depression and be able to process it. So it's all evidence-based. CBT is goal-oriented. CBT is all about moving towards your goals. You should have a good sense of whether the treatment is addressing your goals and how much progress you're making towards them. So CBT is goal-oriented, meaning that it has an end goal. So there's an end to everything, and like your 12 weeks is up. Your 7 weeks with this book, if you choose to do it, your 7 weeks is up, and you have a goal, and you're going to achieve that goal at the end of it. CBT is collaborative. It can be easy to think of a CBT therapist as one who does the fixing. This view matches our typical model of seeking help. For example, a surgeon performs surgery to fix your bum knee, but CBT can't be done to a person. Instead, the therapist is an expert on CBT, and the clients have specialized knowledge about themselves. Success in CBT requires bringing together these perspectives to tailor a treatment for the client's needs. In the same way, you and I will collaborate through this workbook. I'll provide the CBT techniques, and you'll customize them to fit your goals. So the workbook is completely personalized to you, just as CBT therapy is done with therapists. It's a personalized therapy. So it is all focused on your goals and your problems. And it is kind of like you're guiding the therapy, but the therapist or the book is there to have the guidelines, and they have the facts, and they have the evidence, and they're just there to help you along, kind of guide you along. And you're there to just move everything along, fill in the gaps, fill in the story. So that's kind of what CBT therapy is. But, so let's find out what happened to, I don't know if it goes on and tells you what happened to Ted. Oh, it continues on. CBT is structured. So with CBT, you should expect to have a good idea of where you're headed and how to get there. CBT begins on setting clear goals and then designing a roadmap-like treatments. Once we have the map, we'll know if we're moving towards our goals. The structure of CBT builds on itself, with earlier sessions laying the foundation and for the later ones. For example, in week 3 of this program, we'll talk about how to identify unhelpful thoughts, and in week 4, we'll work on how to change those thoughts. So it's like a roadmap, like I was saying. Someone's there to guide you along, which is the book or a therapist, and basically you're there just filling in the gaps. You're filling in the roadmap. So you're putting the story into it, the perspective of everything. CBT is focused on the present. Compared to other therapies, CBT spends more time dealing with what's going on now than on past events. This is not to say that CBT therapists ignore the past or treat childhood events as irrelevant, rather than emphasis on how to change current thoughts and behaviors to bring a lasting relief as quickly as possible. So it's basically focusing on the present, focusing on your problems now and how they affect you. So that way that you can get through them and work through them currently in the present. It doesn't really focus on past events. CBT is an active treatment. This is a roll your sleeves up kind of treatment, with treatment emphasizing tackling clearly defined goals head on. Both therapists and clients are actively engaged in the process. So the therapist and the client is actively engaged, meaning that they're both participating and they're both, like, the therapist is asking questions and you're answering them and you're both actively participating in it. CBT is skills oriented. Through CBT, we learn techniques to manage the issues we're dealing with, practice them on our own, and take them with us, whether treatment is over. People in CBT often say things like, I'm starting to recognize the tricks my mind plays on itself. I can now test whether my thoughts are actually true. And I'm getting better at leaning into my anxiety. So it teaches you coping skills, like I said in the beginning. It teaches you coping skills. So you're really able to cope with your anxiety and cope with your depression. CBT emphasizes practice. In most cases, therapy is 1 hour a week. That leaves 167 hours a week away from the therapist. And so a person must practice new skills between sessions to get the most benefit from them. Many studies have shown that people who work more between sessions do better in CBT. So far, we've covered the basics of CBT, where it came from. In the past few decades, researchers have tested CBT treatments in clinical trials. Let's see what they have found. So basically, that last paragraph is stating that you must practice it every day. So it's not like you just have therapy or you read the 1 week of the book and you're good to go. You have to practice every day. You have to practice your coping skills. You have to practice you basically have to do the homework for it. So you have to write down your goals. You have to work on telling yourself better things. So it's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. And I 100% believe in CBT therapy and that it does work. So then it goes on and it talks about anxiety and depression and different anxiety disorders and depression. I don't want to read the whole book, but it gives you an anxiety checklist. It gives you a depression checklist. And yep, it has you do that. So now we're on to part 2, which is the start of the 7 weeks. So on the next podcast episode, we'll be going through each week. We'll go through it together and we'll do activities and I'll kind of walk through everything and read the book a little more. But I hope that you guys kind of got a little bit of what CBT therapy is, what it can do for you, and I hope you all go out and buy the book and read it along with me and listen into the podcast, because that would be amazing. So thank you all for tuning in to the Book Club, a mental health podcast. Again, I'm your host, Nicole, and hope to see you all next week. Bye!